You know, I have spent the better part of my life watching people chase after things, watching them run toward what they believe will make them whole, will make them happy, will finally give them the peace they seek. And in all these years of observation, of listening to the deepest confessions of the human heart, I have discovered something rather extraordinary, something that goes against everything our modern world teaches us about getting what we want. The very act of grasping, of reaching desperately for what we desire, is the precise mechanism that pushes it away from us. It is as if life operates on some invisible principle that we have forgotten, some ancient law that our ancestors knew, but we have buried beneath layers of ambition and anxiety. I remember sitting in my study many years ago, troubled by a patient who had come to me in desperation. She had everything, you see, everything that society told her should make her content. A successful marriage, financial security, social standing. Yet she sat across from me, tears streaming down her face, asking why she felt so empty, so utterly hollow inside. And as I listened to her, I began to understand something profound about the nature of human suffering. We suffer not because we lack what we want, but because we cling so tightly to the wanting itself. We make our desires into prisons, our longings into chains that bind us to a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. The very intensity of our need creates a kind of energetic repulsion, pushing away the very thing we seek to draw near. This is not some mystical nonsense, though it may sound like it. This is the observable reality of how the psyche functions, how consciousness itself operates in relationship to the world around us. When we are desperate, when we are grasping, when we are driven by compulsive need, we emit a frequency of lack, of incompleteness, and life, in its infinite wisdom, mirrors back to us exactly what we are broadcasting. But there is another way. There is a path that leads not through acquisition but through release, not through grasping but through letting go. And this path, I have discovered, is the secret to receiving everything we have ever truly wanted. You see, when I speak of letting go, I do not mean becoming passive or indifferent. I do not mean abandoning your dreams or resigning yourself to mediocrity. What I mean is something far more subtle, far more powerful. I mean the cultivation of what I have come to call conscious non-attachment. The ability to want something deeply while holding that want lightly, like holding water in cupped hands. This requires us to understand something fundamental about the nature of desire itself. Most of us believe that our desires originate from some external lack, some missing piece that we must find and acquire. But the deeper truth is that our desires are messengers from the unconscious, signals from the deeper self about what we are ready to become, what we are being called to integrate within ourselves. When a person desperately seeks love, what they are really seeking is the capacity to love themselves completely. When someone chases after success, what they truly hunger for is the recognition of their own inherent worth. When we long for peace, what we actually need is to stop warring with ourselves, to cease the internal conflict that creates all our external struggles. The tragedy is that we look everywhere except the one place where these things actually reside. We search the world for what can only be found within. We demand from others what we refuse to give to ourselves. We chase shadows while the light burns bright inside us, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be claimed. I have seen this pattern repeat itself thousands of times in my work with patients. The woman who cannot find love discovers that she has been rejecting herself so completely that no external love could possibly penetrate her defenses. The man who cannot achieves success, realizes that he has been sabotaging himself because he believes deep down that he does not deserve what he seeks. The person who cannot find peace understands finally that they have been at war with their own nature, fighting against the very qualities that make them unique. This is why letting go is so powerful, so transformative. When we release our desperate grip on external outcomes, we create space for internal transformation. When we stop demanding that the world give us what we think we need, we can finally hear what our soul is actually asking for. And what it is asking for, always, is integration, wholeness, the marriage of our conscious desires with our unconscious wisdom. But how does one learn to let go? How does one cultivate this conscious non-attachment in a world that teaches us to want more, to strive harder, to never give up? This is where the real work begins. The work of understanding the deeper layers of the psyche, the hidden motivations that drive our compulsive grasping. Most of our attachment, most of our desperate clinging comes not from love, but from fear. We are terrified of not having enough, of not being enough, of not getting what we think we need to be safe, to be worthy, to be whole. These fears run so deep that we are often unaware of them, yet they control our every move, our every choice, our every relationship. I have discovered that beneath every compulsive desire lies a wounded child, a part of us that learned very early that love was conditional, that worth was earned, that safety was something that had to be fought for and defended. This wounded part of us believes that if we can just get the right person, the right job, the right amount of money, the right recognition, then finally we will be okay. Finally we will be safe. Finally we will be enough. But this is the great illusion, the fundamental misunderstanding that keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering. Safety does not come from external acquisitions. Worth is not earned through achievements. Love is not something we can capture and possess. These are qualities of being, not having. They arise from within when we stop rejecting ourselves, when we cease the internal violence that creates all our external seeking. When I work with someone who is suffering from this kind of compulsive attachment, I do not try to convince them to stop wanting what they want. That would be futile, even harmful. Instead, I invite them to explore the deeper need beneath the surface desire, to understand what their unconscious is actually trying to communicate through their longing. A man who desperately wants to be wealthy might discover that what he really needs is to feel valued, to experience his own power, to trust in his ability to create and provide. A woman who cannot stop seeking approval might realize that what she truly longs for is to approve of herself, to trust her own judgment, to stand confidently in her own truth. Once this deeper understanding emerges, something remarkable happens. The external desire does not disappear, but it loses its compulsive quality. It becomes a preference rather than a need, a hope rather than a demand. And in this shift from desperation to openness, from grasping to allowing, the very thing that was being pushed away by the intensity of our need suddenly has space to approach. This is not magic, though it may appear magical to those who have not understood the principle. This is simply the natural law of psychological energy, the way consciousness interacts with the field of possibility that surrounds us. When we are driven by fear, by lack, by compulsive need, we create a kind of energetic contraction that limits what can enter our experience. But when we learn to hold our desires lightly, when we can want something while simultaneously being okay with not having it, we create an expansion, an opening that allows life to surprise us in ways we never could have imagined. I think of a young artist I once knew who spent years struggling to achieve recognition for his work. He submitted his paintings to galleries, applied for grants, networked tirelessly with other artists and collectors, yet nothing seemed to work. The harder he tried, the more rejections he received. He came to me convinced that the world was against him, that he would never succeed, that perhaps he should abandon his artistic dreams altogether. As we worked together, we began to explore what was beneath his desperate need for recognition. What we discovered was a deep fear that his work had no value, that he himself had no value, that without external validation he was nothing more than a fraud pretending to be an artist. His compulsive seeking of recognition was actually a way of avoiding the terrifying possibility that he might not be good enough, that his work might not matter. Once he could see this pattern clearly, once he could acknowledge the wounded part of himself that needed constant proof of its worth, something began to shift. He started painting not for recognition but for the pure joy of creation. He began to value his own opinion of his work more than the opinions of critics and collectors. He learned to find satisfaction in the process rather than demanding validation from the outcome. And then, in a way that seemed almost miraculous but was actually quite predictable, the recognition he had been chasing began to come to him. Galleries started noticing his work. Collectors began purchasing his paintings. Awards and opportunities appeared that he had never even applied for. But by then these external successes were no longer the source of his identity, no longer the measure of his worth. They were simply pleasant additions to a life that had already become fulfilling. This is what I mean when I say that everything you want in life comes when you let go. Not that you become passive or stop caring about outcomes, but that you stop deriving your sense of self from external acquisitions. You stop making your peace conditional on getting what you think you need. You learn to be whole first, and then allow life to add its gifts to that wholeness. But this letting go, this conscious non-attachment, requires something that most people are unwilling to give. It requires us to face the parts of ourselves that we have been running from, the wounded aspects of our psyche that drive our compulsive behaviors. It asks us to look honestly at our fears, our insecurities, our deep-seated beliefs about what we need to be safe and worthy and loved. This is perhaps the most difficult work any human being can undertake. It is far easier to chase external solutions than to sit with the uncomfortable truth of our own inner landscape. It is far more comfortable to blame circumstances, other people, the unfairness of life, than to acknowledge that we ourselves are the primary architects of our suffering. But here is what I have learned through decades of exploring the depths of human consciousness. The very qualities we most desperately seek in the outer world are already present within us, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be integrated. The love we chase is the love we refuse to give ourselves. The peace we seek is the peace that comes when we stop fighting our own nature. The success we crave is the recognition and power of our own inherent creativity. When we begin to understand this, when we really see that the treasure we seek lies buried in our own backyard, something profound shifts in our relationship to desire itself. We no longer approach our wants from a place of lack, but from a place of curiosity. We no longer demand that life give us what we think we need, but instead ask what life is trying to teach us through our longing. I remember working with a woman who had spent her entire adult life searching for the perfect relationship. She moved from partner to partner, always finding fatal flaws, always discovering that this person too could not give her the complete love and understanding she craved. She came to me exhausted, convinced that she was destined to be alone, that perhaps she was simply too difficult to love. As we explored her pattern, we discovered something remarkable. Every relationship she entered as a beggar. She came to each partner with a cup outstretched, asking them to fill her empty spaces, to heal her wounds, to make her feel worthy and complete. But no human being can carry such a burden. No person can be responsible for another's wholeness. The more desperately she needed her partners to complete her, the more they pulled away. Her very need created a kind of energetic demand that suffocated the natural flow of love. She was asking them to be not lovers but saviors, not companions but therapists, not equals but gods, who could restore her to she could see this pattern clearly, once herself. Once she understood that she had been approaching love from a place of emptiness rather than fullness, everything changed. She began to do the difficult work of loving herself first. She learned to fill her own cup, to heal her own wounds, to find her own worth. She discovered that she could be complete all by herself. And then, when she was no longer desperate, when she no longer needed someone else to make her whole, love came to her in the most natural way. She met someone who was also complete, also whole, and together they created not a relationship of mutual neediness, but a partnership of mutual giving. They loved each other not from emptiness, but from overflow. This is the paradox that most people cannot understand. The more complete you become within yourself, the more attractive you become to others. The more you can stand alone, the more others want to stand beside you. The less you need from the world, the more the world is willing to give you. But this principle extends far beyond romantic relationships. I have seen it operate in every area of human endeavor. The businessman who stops desperately chasing money and instead focuses on creating genuine value finds that wealth flows to him naturally. The artist who stops seeking approval and instead commits to authentic expression discovers that recognition comes without being pursued. The person who stops trying to control every outcome and instead learns to trust the process finds that life begins to support them in ways they never could have orchestrated. Why does this happen? Why does letting go create such profound results? The answer lies in understanding something fundamental about the nature of energy itself. When we are in a state of desperate wanting, we are broadcasting a frequency of lack. We are telling the universe through every thought and action that we do not have what we need, that we are incomplete, that something is missing. The universe, being a perfect mirror of consciousness, reflects back to us exactly what we are putting out. If we are broadcasting lack, we receive experiences of lacking. If we are transmitting fear, we encounter situations that make us afraid. If we are emanating desperation, we find ourselves in circumstances that feel hopeless. But when we learn to let go, when we cultivate that quality of conscious non-attachment, we begin to broadcast a different frequency altogether. We send out signals of completeness, of trust, of inner abundance. And the universe, being the faithful mirror that it is, begins to reflect back experiences that match this new vibration. This is not wishful thinking or positive psychology. This is the observable law of psychological magnetism. Like attracts like, not at the level of surface desires, but at the level of deep being. What you are in your core, you attract into your experience. What you embody, you encounter. I have watched this principle work in my own life countless times. Whenever I have chased after something with desperate intensity, it has eluded to me. Whenever I have tried to force outcomes through sheer will, I have met with resistance and frustration. But whenever I have been able to hold my desires lightly, to want something while simultaneously being prepared to receive something different or better, life has surprised me with gifts beyond my imagining. This does not mean that we become passive or indifferent to outcomes. It means that we learn to engage with life from a place of curiosity rather than demand, from openness rather than grasping, from trust rather than fear. We participate fully while holding our preferences lightly. We act decisively while remaining flexible about results. There is a quality of being that emerges when one truly learns this art of conscious non-attachment. It is a kind of inner freedom that others can sense immediately. People are naturally drawn to those who are complete in themselves, who do not need anything from them, who can offer relationship without the hidden demand for validation or completion. Such people move through the world with a different kind of power, not the power of desperation that tries to force outcomes, but the power of alignment that allows life to flow through them. They become conduits rather than controllers, channels rather than manipulators. And because they are not grasping, not demanding, not trying to get something from every interaction, they create space for genuine connection, authentic exchange, real love. But perhaps the most profound gift of learning to let go is the discovery of who you really are, beneath all the wanting, beneath all the striving, beneath all the fears and needs that have been driving your behavior. When you stop defining yourself by what you lack, when you cease measuring your worth by what you can acquire, you begin to encounter your true nature. And what you discover there is remarkable. You find that you are already whole, already complete, already everything you have been seeking in the outer world. You realize that the peace you have been chasing was never missing, only covered over by your agitation. The love you have been pursuing was never absent, only hidden beneath your self-rejection. The power you have been trying to grasp was never lacking, only forgotten in your feelings of helplessness. This recognition changes everything. Once you know that you are complete, you can engage with the world from a place of play rather than desperation. Once you understand that you already have everything you truly need, you can pursue your desires with lightness rather than heaviness. Once you realize that your worth is not dependent on external validation, you can create and express and love freely without the constant fear of rejection or failure. This transformation, this recognition of your inherent completeness, does not happen overnight. It is not a sudden revelation that sweeps away years of conditioning in a single moment of insight. Rather, it is a gradual awakening, a slow remembering of what you have always known but somehow forgot. It requires patience with yourself, compassion for your own process of unfolding. I have observed that most people resist this letting go precisely because they fear that without their wanting, without their striving, without their constant reaching towards something better, they will become stagnant, unmotivated, ordinary. They believe that their dissatisfaction is what drives them forward, that their hunger is what makes them achieve. But this is perhaps the greatest misunderstanding of all. True motivation, authentic action, genuine creativity arise not from lack but from abundance. When you are driven by what you do not have, your actions carry the vibration of desperation. But when you act from wholeness, from a place of inner fullness, your efforts carry an entirely different quality. They become expressions of joy rather than attempts at acquisition. They become gifts rather than grabbing. I think of the difference between a river that is dammed up, creating pressure and force, and a river that flows freely from a natural spring. The dammed river may appear more powerful in its concentrated force, but it is ultimately destructive, requiring constant maintenance and eventually leading to breakdown. The free-flowing river appears gentler, but it has the power to carve canyons, to nourish entire valleys, to sustain life for thousands of miles. When you learn to act from this free-flowing state, when your efforts arise from inner abundance rather than outer lack, you tap into a source of energy that is inexhaustible. You no longer burn out because you are not burning anything. You are simply allowing what is already present to express itself through you. But here we encounter another paradox, another aspect of the human condition that defies our logical understanding. The very act of trying to let go often becomes another form of grasping. The moment you make non-attachment into a goal, you have attached yourself to the idea of detachment. The instant you try to force yourself to stop wanting, you have created a new want, a desire for desirelessness. This is where many spiritual seekers become trapped, in what I have come to recognize as the subtlest form of ego inflation. They believe they have transcended ordinary human desires, but they have simply elevated their wanting to a more refined level. They chase enlightenment with the same desperate intensity that others chase money or love or fame. They make their spiritual progress into another achievement to acquire another way of proving their worth. True letting go cannot be forced. It can only be invited, cultivated, allowed to emerge naturally from deepening self-awareness. It comes not through trying to eliminate desire, but through understanding the deeper intelligence that creates desire in the first place. When you can see that every longing is actually the soul's attempt to guide you toward greater wholeness, you begin to relate to your wants differently. Instead of judging your desires as obstacles to overcome, you start to listen to them as messengers from the unconscious. Instead of trying to suppress your longings, you learn to decode their deeper meaning. Every want becomes a doorway into self-discovery, every craving an invitation to explore what part of yourself is seeking integration. A man who compulsively seeks power may discover that what he truly needs is to reclaim his own inner authority, to stop giving his power away to others' opinions and expectations. A woman who endlessly pursues beauty treatments and perfect appearance may realize that what she is really seeking is to feel beautiful from the inside out, to love and accept her own unique form of being. When we approach our desires from this perspective, they begin to transform naturally, not through suppression or denial, but through understanding and integration. The compulsive quality dissolves when we address the deeper need beneath the surface want. The desperate grasping relaxes when we give ourselves what we have been trying to get from the external world. This process requires what I call radical self-honesty. You must be willing to look beneath the respectable surface of your desires to see what is really driving them. You must be prepared to encounter aspects of yourself that you may have spent years trying to hide or improve. You must have the courage to meet your own neediness, your own fear, your own sense of inadequacy, with compassion rather than judgment. I remember a conversation with a patient who had built an empire of success around himself. Businesses, properties, investments, all the markers of achievement that society celebrates. Yet he came to me because despite all his external accomplishments, he felt empty, purposeless, as if his life had no real meaning. He could not understand how someone who had achieved so much could feel so unfulfilled. As we worked together, we began to uncover the deeper truth beneath his drive for success. What we found was a small boy who had never felt good enough for his demanding father, who had learned that love was something you earned through performance, through being better than others, through proving your worth over and over again. His entire empire was built not from genuine creativity or authentic ambition, but from this wounded child's desperate attempt to finally be seen as valuable. Once he could acknowledge this pattern, Once he could hold that frightened child within himself with compassion rather than shame, his relationship to success began to change. He no longer needed to acquire more to feel worthy. He no longer had to prove himself constantly to feel loved. His business continued to thrive, but now it came from a place of authentic expression rather than compensatory striving. This is the work that letting go requires. Not the superficial releasing of external desires, but the deep healing of the internal wounds that create compulsive wanting in the first place. It asks you to become a loving parent to your own inner child, to give yourself the acceptance and validation you may never have received from others. When this healing begins to occur, when you start to relate to yourself with genuine kindness rather than constant criticism, something remarkable happens to your entire relationship with life. You no longer approach the world as a beggar seeking handouts, but as a whole person offering gifts. You no longer interact with others from neediness, but from generosity. You no longer chase experiences to fill your emptiness, but create experiences from your fullness. And here is where the true magic begins to unfold. When you are no longer driven by what you lack, when you can engage with life from a place of inner abundance, you become magnetic in an entirely different way. People are drawn to your energy not because you need something from them, but because they feel refreshed and renewed in your presence. Opportunities appear not because you are desperately seeking them, but because you have become someone worth seeking out. Love comes to you not because you are incomplete and looking for someone to complete you, but because you are whole and can offer genuine companionship. Success flows to you not because you are chasing it frantically, but because you are expressing your authentic gifts in the world. Peace finds you not because you have eliminated all challenges from your life, but because you have learned to remain centered regardless of external circumstances. This is what I have witnessed again and again in my work with those brave enough to undertake this journey of inner transformation. The external changes that occur are often dramatic, sometimes appearing almost miraculous to outside observers. But for the person who has done the inner work, these changes feel natural, organic, like the inevitable result of aligning with their true nature. I must emphasize, however, that this process is not always comfortable. There are periods of profound disorientation as you release old patterns and ways of being that have defined you for years or even decades. There are moments of grief as you let go of dreams and identities that no longer serve your growth. There are times of uncertainty as you navigate life without the familiar compass of compulsive wanting to guide your choices. This is what I call the dark night of the soul, that necessary passage through confusion and emptiness that precedes genuine rebirth. Many people turn back at this threshold, preferring the familiar suffering of their old patterns to the unknown territory of authentic freedom. They choose the devil they know over the angel they have yet to meet. But for those who have the courage to continue, who can trust the process, even when they cannot see where it is leading, extraordinary transformation awaits. On the other side of this dissolution lies a way of being that most people can hardly imagine. A life lived from the inside out rather than the outside in. A existence grounded in being rather than having, in essence rather than appearance, in truth rather than performance. From this place, action becomes effortless because it arises from natural impulse rather than forced will. Relationships become nourishing because they are based on authentic connection rather than mutual neediness. Work becomes fulfilling because it expresses your genuine nature rather than compensating for your insecurities. Life becomes an adventure because you are no longer trying to control every outcome, but are curious to see what wants to emerge through you. This is not to say that challenges disappear or that life becomes perpetually easy. Rather, your relationship to difficulty changes entirely. Problems become puzzles to solve rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Setbacks become information rather than proof of failure. Pain becomes a teacher rather than an enemy to be avoided at all costs. When you are no longer deriving your identity from external circumstances, when your sense of self is not dependent on things going your way, you can meet whatever life presents with curiosity and creativity rather than resistance, reactivity. You become like water, taking the shape of whatever container life provides, while never losing your essential nature. This fluid responsiveness, this ability to adapt without compromising your core integrity, is perhaps the greatest gift of learning to let go. You develop what the ancient Taoists called the power of yielding, the strength that comes not from rigidity but from flexibility, not from forcing but from flowing. And in this flowing, in this dance between desire and detachment, between wanting and allowing, you discover something that cannot be taught or explained, but only experienced directly. You find that you are not separate from life itself, not an isolated individual struggling against an indifferent universe, but an expression of the very consciousness that creates and sustains all existence. When this recognition dawns, when you truly see that you are not in life, but that life is in you, the whole game changes. You realize that everything you have been seeking outside yourself was always already present within you. The love you craved is the love you are. The peace you pursued is the peace that you are. The wholeness you chased is the wholeness that you have always been. This is not philosophical theory, but lived reality, available to anyone willing to undertake the journey from grasping to allowing, from desperation to trust, from seeking to being. It requires nothing more than the courage to let go of who you think you are in order to discover who you really are. And what you discover there will transform not only your own life, but the lives of everyone you touch, rippling out in ways you may never fully know, but will feel in the depth of your being. The moment you truly understand this, the moment you really see that seeking and finding are not opposite activities, but the same movement expressing itself in different forms, you begin to approach your desires from an entirely new place. You no longer chase them like a hungry animal pursuing prey. Instead, you court them like a gardener tends to seeds, creating the right conditions and then trusting in the natural process of growth. I have spent countless hours in my study, watching the interplay between consciousness and the unconscious, observing how the psyche organizes itself around what it believes it needs. And what I have discovered is this: the unconscious is far wiser than our conscious mind gives it credit for. It knows exactly what we need for our growth, for our individuation, for our becoming whole, but it speaks in a language that our rational mind often cannot understand. Our desires are not random impulses or meaningless cravings. They are communications from the deeper self, messages about what qualities, what experiences, what aspects of ourselves are ready to be integrated. When a person desperately wants to be seen and recognized, the unconscious is not asking them to become famous. It is asking them to see and recognize themselves. When someone hungers for security and stability, the psyche is not demanding external guarantees. It is calling for the development of inner trust, inner groundedness. But here is where most people go astray. They interpret these messages literally. They think the unconscious wants them to acquire something external when it is actually asking them to develop something internal. This misunderstanding creates what I have come to call the great displacement, the tragic error of looking outside for what can only be found within. I remember working with a man who had built his entire life around the pursuit of respect. He climbed corporate ladders, accumulated degrees and credentials, surrounded himself with symbols of status and achievement. Yet no matter how much external respect he commanded, he never felt truly seen or valued. He came to me exhausted, convinced that the world was blind to his worth, that people were simply incapable of recognizing his contributions. As we explored his pattern, we discovered something remarkable. Every time someone did show him genuine respect or appreciation, he dismissed it. He told himself they did not really know him, that their admiration was based on false impressions, that if they truly understood who he was, they would surely reject him. His desperate seeking of respect was actually a way of avoiding the terrifying possibility that he might be worthy of it. The unconscious, in its infinite wisdom, had been trying to teach him to respect himself. Every situation that triggered his need for external validation was an opportunity to practice internal validation. Every moment when he felt unseen was an invitation to see himself more clearly. But he kept looking outward, kept demanding from others what he refused to give to himself. Once he could recognize this pattern, once he could see that his hunger for respect was actually his psyche's way of calling him home to himself, everything began to shift. He started treating himself with the dignity he had been demanding from others. He began to acknowledge his own contributions instead of waiting for external recognition. He learned to see his own worth instead of desperately trying to prove it to the world. And then, in that mysterious way that life operates when we align with its deeper currents, the respect he had been chasing began to flow toward him naturally. But by then, it was no longer the source of his identity. It was simply a pleasant confirmation of what he had already discovered within himself. This is the profound truth that most people never grasp. The external world is not separate from your internal world. It is an extension of it, a reflection of it, a manifestation of your own consciousness exploring itself through apparently separate forms. When you change the inner landscape, the outer landscape shifts accordingly, not through magic, but through the natural law of psychological correspondence. But this realization brings with it a responsibility that many find overwhelming. If the external world is reflecting your internal state, then you can no longer blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck for your suffering. You must take full ownership of your experience, not in a harsh, self-critical way, but in a way that empowers you to create change from the inside out. This is perhaps the most difficult teaching for the modern mind to accept. We have been trained to see ourselves as victims of circumstances, as small separate beings at the mercy of forces beyond our control. The idea that we are actually co-creators of our experience, that our consciousness is actively participating in shaping what we encounter, challenges our most basic assumptions about reality. Yet once you begin to see this principle in operation, once you start to notice how your inner state correlates with your outer experiences, you cannot unsee it. You begin to recognize that your relationships mirror your relationship with yourself. Your financial situation reflects your sense of inner abundance or scarcity. Your health correlates with how well you are caring for your own deepest needs. This recognition can be initially disturbing. I have watched patients go through periods of profound disillusionment as they realize how much of their suffering has been self-created, how many of their problems have been unconscious attempts to avoid growth or change. But this disillusionment is necessary. It is the breakdown of illusions that must occur before genuine empowerment can emerge. When you can no longer blame external circumstances for your internal state, you discover something extraordinary. You find that you have far more power than you ever imagined. Not the power to control external events, which is largely an illusion anyway, but the power to choose your response to whatever life presents. The power to transform your experience from the inside out. I have observed that people who truly grasp this principle go through a profound shift in their relationship to desire itself. They stop approaching their wants as problems to be solved and start seeing them as information to be understood. They become curious about what their longings are trying to teach them, what aspects of themselves are seeking integration through these apparently external needs. A woman who desperately wants children might discover that what she truly needs is to nurture and care for the neglected parts of herself. A man who obsessively pursues wealth might realize that what he is really seeking is the sense of power and freedom that comes from trusting his own creative abilities. A person who cannot stop seeking approval might understand that what they actually need is to develop their own inner authority, their own capacity for self-validation. When desires are approached from this perspective, they begin to transform naturally, not through suppression or denial, but through understanding and integration. The compulsive quality dissolves as the deeper need is addressed. The desperate grasping relaxes as the inner work is done. But this process requires something that our instant gratification culture actively discourages. It requires patience with your own unfolding, trust in your own timing, faith in the natural process of psychological development. You cannot force this kind of transformation. You can only create the conditions that allow it to occur. This is where the art of conscious waiting becomes essential. Not passive waiting, not resigned acceptance of circumstances you could change, but active waiting, alert waiting, waiting that is itself a form of participation in your own becoming. Like a farmer who plants seeds and then tends to the soil while trusting in the natural process of growth, you learn to nurture your inner development while allowing it to unfold at its own pace. I think of the difference between a flower that is forced to bloom prematurely and one that opens in its own time. The forced flower may appear beautiful for a moment, but it lacks the strength and sustainability of one that has developed naturally. In the same way, transformation that is rushed or forced may create temporary changes, but it lacks the deep roots necessary for lasting growth. This understanding changes your entire approach to personal development. Instead of trying to fix yourself as if you were a broken machine, you begin to tend to yourself as if you were a garden. Instead of demanding immediate results, you learn to appreciate the subtle signs of growth that may not be visible to outside observers. Instead of judging yourself for not changing fast enough, you develop compassion for your own process of becoming. And in this gentleness with yourself, in this patience with your own unfolding, something remarkable begins to happen. The very qualities you have been desperately seeking in the external world begin to emerge naturally from within. The love you have been chasing starts to flow from your own heart. The peace you have been pursuing arises from your own center. The wholeness you have been seeking reveals itself as your true nature. This is not a theory or a philosophy, but a lived reality that becomes available to anyone willing to undertake this journey of inner exploration. It requires nothing more than the willingness to turn your attention inward, to listen to the wisdom of your own psyche, to trust in the natural intelligence that is already operating within you. But I must warn you that this path is not for the faint of heart. It will ask you to question everything you think you know about yourself, about life, about what it means to be human. It will invite you to release identities and beliefs that have defined you for years, perhaps decades. It will require you to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate not knowing, to trust in a process that you cannot control or fully understand. There will be times when you feel lost, when the old way of being has dissolved but the new way has not yet crystallized. There will be periods of profound emptiness as you release the false structures that have been holding your sense of self together. There will be moments of terror as you realize how much of your identity has been built on illusions and compensations. This is what the mystics have always called the dark night of the soul, that necessary passage through dissolution that precedes genuine rebirth. Many people turn back at this threshold, preferring the familiar pain of their old patterns to the unknown territory of authentic transformation. They choose the security of their limitations over the freedom of their potential. But for those who have the courage to continue, who can trust the process even when they cannot see where it is leading, something extraordinary awaits. On the other side of this dissolution lies a way of being that most people can hardly imagine. A life lived from the inside out rather than the outside in. An existence grounded in being rather than having, in essence rather than appearance, in truth rather than performance. From this place, desires arise naturally, but are he lightly. D.L. You can want something deeply while simultaneously being at peace with not having it. You can pursue goals passionately while remaining unattached to specific outcomes. You can engage fully with life while maintaining an inner stillness that no external circumstance can disturb. This is what I have come to understand as the true meaning of letting go. Not the elimination of desire, but the transformation of your relationship to desire. Not the absence of wanting, but the presence of inner fullness that makes all wanting optional rather than compulsive. Not the rejection of the world, but the recognition that you are already complete, already whole, already everything you have been seeking outside yourself. When this recognition dawns, when you truly see that you are not lacking anything essential, your entire approach to life changes. You no longer approach each day as a problem to be solved, but as a gift to be received. You no longer see other people as sources of supply for your needs, but as fellow travelers on the journey of becoming. You challenges no longer view as obstacles to your happiness, but as opportunities for growth and integration. This shift, what in perspective creates, I can only describe as a different quality of existence. Life becomes lighter, more playful, more spontaneous. You find yourself responding to situations with creativity rather than reactivity, with curiosity rather than defensiveness, with openness rather than contraction. You begin to move through the world like a dancer rather than a warrior, flowing with the rhythms of existence rather than fighting against them. And here's perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this transformation. The more complete you become within yourself, the more you have to offer others. The more whole you feel, the more healing your presence becomes. The more at peace you are with yourself, the more peace you bring to every interaction. Your very being becomes a gift to the world, not because you are trying to be helpful, but because wholeness naturally radiates itself. I have observed this phenomenon countless times in my work with patients who have undergone this kind of inner transformation. They do not become passive or withdrawn from life. Instead, they become more alive, more engaged, more creative than ever before. But their engagement comes from a different place now. It arises from fullness rather than emptiness, from love rather than need, from joy rather than compulsion. They approach their relationships not as opportunities to get their needs met, but as chances to share their gifts. They engage with their work not as a means of proving their worth, but as an expression of their authentic nature. They pursue their dreams not from desperation, but from inspiration, not because they need to achieve something to be complete, but because they are already complete and their completeness wants to express itself in the world. This is what I mean when I say that everything you want in life comes when you let go. Not that your desires disappear or that you stop caring about outcomes, but that you stop making your peace conditional on getting what you think you need. You discover that you already are what you have been seeking to become. You already have what you have been trying to acquire. You already know what you have been hoping to learn. And from this place of inner abundance, from this recognition of your own completeness, you begin to engage with life in a completely different way. You become magnetic, not because you are needy, but because you are full. You attract what you desire not by chasing it, but by becoming it. You receive what you want not by demanding it, but by embodying the very qualities you have been seeking in the external world. This is the great secret, the profound truth that all the wisdom traditions have pointed toward in their own unique ways. You are not separate from what you seek. You are not lacking what you need. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are already whole, already complete, already perfect in your essential nature. The journey is not about acquiring something new, but about remembering something ancient, something that you have always known, but somehow forgot in the process of growing up and adapting to a world that taught you to look outside for what can only be found within. When this remembering occurs, when you truly recognize your own inherent wholeness, everything changes. Not because your external circumstances necessarily improve, though they often do, but because your relationship to those circumstances is transformed entirely. You no longer need life to be different than it is in order for you to be at peace. You no longer require other people to change in order for you to be happy. You no longer demand that the world conform to your expectations in order for you to feel safe and secure. Instead, you learn to find your peace in the midst of chaos, your happiness in the midst of difficulty, your security in the midst of uncertainty. You discover that these qualities are not dependent on external conditions, but are expressions of your own inner nature, when it is no longer clouded by fear, by need, by the compulsive seeking that keeps you running away from yourself. This is the ultimate paradox, the final joke that life plays on us. We spend so much time and energy trying to get somewhere else, to become someone different, to acquire something more, when what we are truly seeking has been with us all along. We are like the person who frantically searches for their glasses while wearing them, or the one who looks everywhere for keys that are already in their pocket. The very thing we have been running toward is what we have been running from. The love we seek is the love we are afraid to give ourselves. The peace we pursue is the peace we disturb with our constant seeking. The wholeness we crave is the wholeness we fragment with our belief in our own incompleteness. When you finally stop running, when you finally turn around and look directly at what you have been avoiding, you discover that there was never anything to run from in the first place. There was only the fear of not being enough, the terror of being rejected, the anxiety of not having what you need to survive, and fears these thrive. But when faced directly with compassion and understanding, dissolve like shadows in the light of awareness. And what remains when the fears dissolve? Ulcif seeking stops, when the desperate when, the comp grasping finally relaxes. What remains is what was always there, beneath the struggle, the drama, beneath the endless quest for something more. What remains is you, the real you, the essential you that needs nothing added to it to be complete, nothing taken away from it to be perfect, nothing changed about it to be worthy of love. This you that remains is not the personality you have constructed, not the roles you play, not the achievements you have accumulated or the failures you have endured. This you is the consciousness that has been watching the whole drama unfold, the awareness that has been present through every experience, the being that has remained unchanged through all the changes of your life. When you recognize this deeper identity, when you see that you are not your thoughts or your emotions or your circumstances, but the awareness in which all these things arise and pass away, you find the peace that surpasses understanding, the joy that needs no reason, the love that requires no object. You discover that you have always been what you were seeking to become. You have always had what you were trying to acquire. You have always known what you were hoping to learn. And this recognition, this remembering of who you truly are beneath all the seeking and striving, brings with it a profound responsibility. Not the burden of having to change the world or fix everyone around you, but the responsibility of living from this place of wholeness, of allowing your authentic nature to express itself without apology or compromise. I have watched so many people reach this threshold of understanding only to retreat back into familiar patterns of seeking and grasping. They touch the truth of their completeness for a moment, feel the peace of their essential nature, and then become frightened by the implications. If I am already whole, they wonder, what does that mean for my marriage built on mutual neediness? What does it mean for my career driven by the compulsion to prove my worth? What does it mean for my entire identity constructed around what I lack? This fear is understandable, even natural. To truly embody your wholeness means to live in a way that most of the world will not understand. It means making choices from inner guidance rather than external pressure. It means saying no to opportunities that look good on paper but feel wrong in your soul. It means disappointing people who have grown accustomed to your old patterns of accommodation and self-abandonment. I remember a patient, a successful lawyer, who had spent 30 years climbing the ladder of professional achievement. She had everything that society told her should make her happy, yet she came to me because she woke up every morning with a sense of dread, as if she were living someone else's life. Through our work together, she began to recognize that she had become a lawyer, not from any authentic calling, but because it was what her family expected, what seemed safe and prestigious. As she connected with her true nature, she discovered a deep longing to work with children, to create art, to live more simply and authentically. But this recognition terrified her. To follow her authentic path would mean disappointing her parents, leaving financial security, starting over at an age when most people are consolidating their gains. The pressure to stay in the familiar prison of success was enormous. Yet something in her had awakened that could not be put back to sleep. Once you have tasted your authentic nature, once you have felt the aliveness that comes from being true to yourself, you cannot willingly return to the deadness of living someone else's life. It may take time, it may require careful planning and gradual transition, but the movement toward authenticity becomes inevitable. She eventually did leave her law practice, not in a dramatic gesture of rebellion, but through a careful, conscious transition that honored both her need for security and her call to authenticity. She began working with at-risk youth, using her legal knowledge to advocate for children, while also expressing her creative gifts through art therapy. Her income decreased significantly, but her aliveness, her sense of purpose, her joy in waking up each morning increased beyond measure. This is what it means to live from wholeness, rather than seeking wholeness through external acquisition. It means making choices that align with your deepest truth, even when those choices make no sense to the rational mind or the expectations of society. It means trusting the intelligence of your authentic nature, even when you cannot see where here is what I have, observe it, is leading. But about people who make this transition from seeking to being. They do not become isolated or antisocial. They do not withdraw from the world in some kind of spiritual bypassing. Instead, they become more genuinely engaged, more present, more capable of real intimacy and connection than ever before. When you are no longer trying to get something from every interaction, when you are no longer performing to earn approval or love, you create space for authentic relationship. People feel safe around you because they sense that you are not trying to use them for your own psychological needs. They can relax in your presence because you are not demanding that they be different than they are in order for you to be comfortable. This quality of presence, this ability to be with others without needing them to fill your empty spaces or validate your worth, is perhaps the greatest gift you can offer. It allows others to be themselves in ways they may never have experienced before. Your wholeness gives them permission to explore their own completeness. I think of the ripple effects that occur when even one person in a family system, a workplace, a community begins to live from this place of inner fullness. They stop participating in the unconscious games of mutual neediness that keep groups trapped in dysfunction. They no longer contribute to the collective anxiety that comes from everyone looking to everyone else for what they refuse to give themselves. Instead, they become what I call a stabilizing presence, someone who remains centered regardless of the emotional weather around them, not through suppression or denial, not through spiritual bypassing or emotional withdrawal, but through genuine inner stability that comes from knowing who they are beneath all the roles and identities and circumstances. This kind of person becomes a reference point for others, a living example of what is possible when someone stops running from themselves and starts living from their center. They do not preach or try to convert others to their way of being. Their very existence becomes the teaching. But I must address something that troubles many people when they first encounter these ideas. There is a fear that letting go of desire, that finding completeness within yourself, will make you passive, unmotivated, ordinary. There is a concern that without the driving force of want and need, you will become complacent, that you will stop growing and achieving and contributing to the world. This fear reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of authentic motivation. Most people believe that dissatisfaction is what drives human achievement, that suffering is what motivates change, that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is what creates forward movement in life. But what I have observed is quite different. The most profound creativity, the most lasting contributions, the most meaningful achievements arise not from lack, but from overflow. When someone is truly connected to their essential nature, when they have found their center and learned to live from that place of inner abundance, they become incredibly productive and creative. But their productivity comes from a different source now. Instead of creating from emptiness trying to fill itself, they create from fullness expressing itself. Instead of achieving to prove their worth, they achieve because achievement is a natural expression of their vitality. Instead of contributing to the world because they should or must, they contribute because they cannot help but share the gifts that flow through them when they are aligned with their true nature. I have known artists who created their most powerful work only after they stopped trying to be successful, only after they began creating from pure love of the creative process itself. I have known entrepreneurs who built their most innovative companies only after they stopped chasing money and began following their authentic vision. I have known healers who became most effective only after they stopped trying to fix others and began simply being present with their own wholeness. This is the paradox that the driven, achievement-oriented mind cannot understand. The more complete you become within yourself, the more you have to give. The less you need from the world, the more the world benefits from your presence. The more at peace you are with yourself, the more powerfully you can engage with life's challenges. But this engagement has a completely different quality now. Instead of the frantic energy of someone trying to prove themselves or acquire something they think they need, there is a calm intensity, a focused presence that can accomplish far more with far less effort. Instead of the scattered attention of someone constantly looking over their shoulder to see what others think, there is a concentrated power that comes from moving in alignment with your deepest truth. I remember watching a master craftsman work with wood many years ago. He was not hurried, not anxious, not trying to impress anyone. Yet every movement was precise, every cut was perfect, every decision was made with quiet confidence. He was completely absorbed in his work, not because he was trying to achieve anything in particular, but because working with wood was an expression of his nature. The beauty he created was not forced or contrived, but emerged naturally from his alignment with his craft. This is what authentic action looks like. Not the driven striving of ego trying to prove itself, but the natural expression of being flowing through appropriate form. When you are truly connected to your essential nature, when you have found your center and learned to live from that place, your actions carry a different kind of power. They are effortless yet effective, gentle yet strong, humble yet confident. And here we come to perhaps the most profound aspect of this entire teaching. When you truly let go, when you genuinely find your completeness within yourself, you discover that you are not separate from life itself. You realize that the consciousness looking out through your eyes is the same consciousness looking out through everyone else's eyes. You understand that the awareness in which your thoughts and feelings arise is the same awareness in which all existence unfolds. And so we return to where we began, but now we see it differently. The chase ends not when you catch what you were running after, but when you realize you were never separate from it in the first place. Everything you have ever wanted was always seeking you just as desperately as you were seeking it. The moment you stop running away from yourself, the moment you turn toward your own heart with the same intensity you once turned toward the world, everything changes. Not because you have acquired something new, but because you have remembered something eternal. You are already whole. You have always been whole, and in that wholeness lies everything you have ever dreamed of finding.